I know you have heard it said, we all have, Season 8 of Game of Thrones sucks. Well, I'm suggesting that Season 8 of Game of Thrones hits a visceral, subconscious chord because Game of Thrones is telling the story of what's going on around us right now, today. And the answer to what's going on is not pretty. Art imitates life, which imitates art. If you haven't watched Game of Thrones, you should. I gotta tell you, I don't watch a lot of TV and movies, but for me, it is a guilty pleasure. I absolutely love watching it. So first I'm gonna tell you what technical reason people give for why Game of Thrones Season 8 sucks. You see, the first 5 or so seasons were written based on George R.R. Martin's books, the collection called A Song of Ice and Fire. By Season 6, the show creators, Dave Benioff and Dan Weiss, had to start creating the shows themselves because they had outpaced George. There were no more books to take from. Now they got together, they created outlines, but surely it wasn't the same. By Season 8, there was little to no nuance left at all. Interestingly, the show still made history because it seemed to write itself based on conversations taking place on social media about what people wanted to see. Now that's an interesting phenomenon to talk about, but it's for another time. Now I'm going to tell you the 3 reasons that I think we really believe Season 8 of Game of Thrones sucks, and it's more deep than we can possibly imagine. Number 1, the idea that in the end it's all for nothing. Let's start in episode 6 of Season 8 when Tyrion Lannister is escorted as a prisoner to the dragon pit, and he faces the semicircle of all the lords and ladies of Westeros who are going to decide who their next ruler is. And in conversation it comes up and they ask Tyrion, who do you think our next ruler should be? Well, the nation is in ashes at this point and they have to start over. He looks at the semicircle of potential claimants to the throne and asks, what unites people? Armies, gold, flags, self-interest. Anyway, after this brilliant speech, he concludes that there is nothing more powerful than a story. He says nothing can stop it. What he means is that people need a shared set of ideas about who they are, where they come from, what they want, how they should treat each other, how they can live in peace and safety. I see an interesting link for us today in this particular scene in Game of Thrones. Whether people like it or not, diversity and multiculturalism was an American policy for several decades. Some people agree and some don't. But what it did do, whether we like it or not, is put us all in the same room together. But it doesn't tell us how to treat each other, how to talk to each other, what our shared heritage should be, what our shared values should be. All of the things that Tyrion is saying. What's our story? We don't have a story. That hits us deep and it makes us hate Season 8 of Game of Thrones. The second reason we hate Season 8 of Game of Thrones comes down to subjectivism versus objectivism. When a society has one set of objective guidelines that they all strive to live by, you have a healthy civilization. Well, during the duration of Game of Thrones, different leaders vied for power, each demonstrating the strengths, weaknesses, and character traits of leaders of the past. It is very reminiscent of The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli in this way. Just to give you examples, I'll tell you what I mean. In Robert Baratheon, we saw strength, militarism, but he was ill-equipped to lead and he was a lover of carnal pleasures. Stannis Baratheon, his brother, had hereditary right to rule, a strict sense of justice, but he was cold, violent, and easily swayed by nefarious staffers. You had the little brother Renly Baratheon. He had the vigor, the popularity of youth, potential with military skill. He was transparent, but he was also unrealistic about how the world worked, and he was too idealistic. You had Joffrey Baratheon, the boy king. He represented the negative consequences of hereditary leadership. I'm your king because my father was your king. He was a tyrant. He was indifferent to the plight of the people. His little brother Tommen Baratheon represented a well-intentioned, capable, and willing ruler whose youth and inexperience made him easy to take advantage of, and conflicting loyalties that he failed to be decisive about destroyed his monarchy. We have Daenerys Targaryen, the heir to the Targaryen dynasty overthrown by Robert Baratheon during the prior generation. She was eager to learn, had a heart to free the oppressed, but she used brutal and violent means to accomplish it. Her courtiers around her saw the happiness of the freed people, and they overlooked the brutality with which she had freed them. Toward the end of Game of Thrones, when asked to forgive a prisoner and close friend, she said, quote, "We can't hide behind small mercies. The world we need won't be built by the ones who built the world we had." And of course, we had Cersei Lannister, experienced, capable of maneuvering the mechanisms of government to accomplish her wishes, but violent, maniacal, immoral. Will go to any lengths to get what she wants, including destroying people. And you finally have Jon Snow, Aegon, sixth of his name Targaryen. Jon is the moral Christian archetype of the perfect medieval king in our minds. He is King Arthur. Martin gave him to us in the story. He was killed by his people for making a remarkably tough political decision. Look, politicians don't make long-term decisions that are in the best interest of the people and have short-term consequences for them personally. They just don't do it. Jon Snow is killed for doing it, but he's somehow resurrected. More Christian symbolism there. On the other hand, his family's subjective sense of honor, strict adherence to laws even when morally wrong, and lack of willingness to play politics set him up for failure. Oh, there were a few more. We had Robb Stark. He'd be the Instagrammer, right? He had good looks, proper hereditary lineage, military skill, but he attempted to emulate his father's kingship instead of using his talents to build his own. He also showed mercy to the point that it was unjust and made him appear weak. We had Balon Greyjoy. Look, I struggled to come up with character assets and leadership qualities for him. Help me in the comments. Give me anything about Balon Greyjoy, please. Sansa Stark developed her skill, learned the hard way, learned by experience to administer a kingdom and the mechanisms of bureaucracy to perfection. She was naive in her youth, but she outgrew it. She represents those people in government whose names we don't know, have never been in any congressional scandals, but have devoted themselves to sincere public service, and they do exist. And finally, we have Brandon Stark, Bran the Broken, the One-Eyed Raven. Bran did not have the correct hereditary lineage and was crippled as a boy from a high fall, but he developed his mind and worked through great risk and adversity to master his mind, becoming a sort of religious figure called the Three-Eyed Raven. He could see things past, present, and future. Births and deaths, baptisms, feasts and famines, victories and defeats. The third reason we really hate Season 8 of Game of Thrones, because it points back at us, our moral relativism. The main religion in George Martin's Westeros is a system that worships 7 deities. It's pagan in origin, and its roots lie somewhere with prior Westerosi leaders. At the same time, many different cultures and belief systems are alluded to. In Game of Thrones, it's clear that multicultural societies don't have a shared religious tradition, and it leads to uncertainty about what morals are right and good, and which God is right, and are they all the same God? In Game of Thrones, this moral relativism is present, but it's present in another way too. On top of that, nothing in Game of Thrones gives the viewer cut and dry moral decisions to make with the characters. It's always the gray areas trying to figure out what we would do if we were in those situations. The whole world of Westeros, like ours today, is taking place in a moral gray area where morally relativistic society tolerates everything. By the end of Game of Thrones, Westeros is in ashes. In the end, it's all for naught. Some died, some were killed, some ran, and some stood willing to fix things, admitting they had made mistakes. We don't like Game of Thrones Season 8 because at the end we destroy ourselves and have to start from scratch again, and that's where many feel we are today. We don't like it because it doesn't give us objective standards to live by. When it became time to choose a king, they decided the most rich and powerful among them should choose the leader. The idea of the democratic principle of the popular vote was shamed in Game of Thrones. One hopes that whichever personality they choose to be their next king or queen, it's one that cares for the commoners. Boy, I hope that for us today too. Game of Thrones showed us our own society and our own epistemology. Let's hope the king they choose is not violent, because as we learned, some are willing to protect and others are willing to kill on a mass scale and believe they're doing the right thing doing it. Martin knows we live in a time of moral relativism, and he shows us this in the end. By having Jon Snow kill Daenerys, he did do what was right, but he did not take the throne to impose what he thought was right on others. He decided, I can't ensure my subjective view of moral goodness can be the same for everyone in the world. In the end, whether you love or hate Game of Thrones, it is a series that has a lot of concepts worthy of great thought in our time. And I hope if it can teach us something, it's that it's up to us to answer the questions about what our shared heritage will be and how we will decide to live and treat each other and move forward together as a society. Talk to you next time. May your work today bear fruit.